showing up, everybody. Come on a beautiful day here. My name is Jim Masonbrink. I'm the director of the Small Business Hub here at the Wright Brothers Institute. Welcome to the part one of the DCAA Collider series. There is going to be 5 of these. Okay, so it's going to be from now till November. We are skipping September just due to September is always a bad month for everybody that's involved with the government. So we're skipping September. So I want to tell you, take this opportunity since I got a little bit of an audience here to tell you some of the upcoming colliders, okay, that you might be interested in. On June 2nd, if you're attending Right Dialogue and you're a contractor, there are some things you need to register, some forms and stuff you need to register because they don't want anybody just walking in to the Right Dialogue with industry. So it kind of explains that and also gives you an overview of the conference. On June 9th, there is a propulsion collider. A gentleman by the name of Gary Smith. He's a retired engineer. He's a consultant now. He does UAS. He's a huge propulsion guy. And he's got a very interesting collider coming up there. Really looking forward to that. Right now I got about 20 people signed up though, but I've been really trying to promote that a little bit more. And then on the 14th, valuable online resources for small businesses. What that is myself, Bill Harrison, this is some contact from the CIBR office, Wright State Research Institute, and also Fast Rope. I'm working on Fast Rope to get them to come too. But we are all specifically talking about just different online resources that are out there. A lot of people don't realize how many tools are out there for small businesses to take advantage of. So hopefully that'll help you guys, with your business. Maybe some new, online resources that you're not aware of that are out there. And one that I forgot, don't have up here, but the June 30th, this is part 2 for these guys, okay? And that's going to be on June 30th, and that's on proposal adequacy. One of you guys mind just giving a little brief, when you get ready to speak on that, do you know what it's going to be about, or?
Sure, I mean, the general concept of proposal adequacy is that when you're putting together a proposal to the government, there are certain requirements from Table 15-2 about the types of support and how the process is to work. And we're going to go over, various cost elements. We're going to talk about what is support, a little bit about what's judgments involved, and talk about that process so that when you submit that proposal and it's selected for audit for whatever reason, that you have a perspective as to what DCAA is going to ask you through that process.
Just to let you know, this DCAA Collider series that we're having here is probably one of the most successful ones that we've had. I mean, it's great because they're, it's the people are excited, they won, like CIBR won and everything, and then all of a sudden, immediately they're asking, are you DCAA certified to get your, phase 2, like Terry, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, we had this discussion earlier. Yeah. So, and then Right Dialogue with Industry is going to be the 19th to the 21st. That will be, as Dayton Defense is hosting that, and it is at the Convention Center. Usually a very good conference. It's 3 days. We're also going to just talk to Lloyd today about possibly having another collider there. So obviously we're just starting to talk about today, so I don't have it up here. But we're going to talk about autonomy, and if you want to say a couple words about that.
Sure. The 3-day conference or event of Right Dialogue with Industry is really focused on the government and focused on government contractors. So that's why that first one, that DD 2345,
Right.
needs to be done. And then in the planning for it, the leadership from Air Force Research Lab has talked about autonomy being an emerging area, something that really needs to bring definition around it. So in the context of the dialogue, Jim has graciously agreed to stand up the Collider event to really create a real focused dialogue on autonomy for the government to hear back from industry. What do you consider autonomy? And for the industry to hear back from the government, what do you consider autonomy? It's a mile wide and a mile deep kind of a topic. So we really, the Collider is intending to focus and bring that down to, again, just that dialogue on how we define autonomy and what should we be working on for nation security.
Yeah, we're shooting for the second night, which will be the 20th in the evening, probably at the Crown Plaza. So after the second day is over, that's the day we're shooting for. So.
Just coming over from AFRL, what names are coming over for that?
Well, Jack Blackhurst is behind it, but probably Dr. Geis, those folks. We're just in the definition stages on that right now.
Okay. And then take this opportunity to show you guys. These are all the available connections. I think some of you picked up my little flyer over there. I'll also be sending you a digital copy tomorrow. Or Ryan will. This is Ryan Clark, new intern, Wright State. And so obviously you guys are here because of our Collider page. Sorry if we don't try not to spam you, but we want to give you as much information as possible. I hope you guys are reading them, not deleting them. So, and then please, if you're not on Twitter, I would highly recommend you to get on Twitter. If you are on Twitter, please follow us. We put a lot of valuable information out there on Twitter. Twitter is really growing as a marketing tool. It's a very powerful resource because it immediately gets out to whoever is following you, okay? So please take advantage of that. You can also follow Bill Harrison. He's the AFRL SD director at So he puts out some awesome stuff too. I think everybody here probably should know Bill, right? You guys know Bill Harrison? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the SIBR office also has a Twitter handle too. They put some good stuff out there. The SIBR office also has a Facebook page. They have a YouTube channel, and we just recently stood up a YouTube channel also. We'll take our video today, post it out there. We've learned though it takes a couple days to post our videos because they're like 11 gigs, because they're like 2 hours long. So, but they'll eventually get out there. So if somebody didn't make it or whatever, if you guys want to relay that, you guys should have saw this Collider and push them towards the YouTube page. And then these are some of the online resources that we'll go over at that Collider I was telling you about on the online resources. And then next, some of the very helpful sites. I don't know if you guys have hit the Dayton Tech Guide yet or not, .com, but that's a very valuable resource. It's created by Wright State Research Institute. And this site is just amazing. It's got base, it's got community-wide businesses. It's just an awesome resource. It's good for partnering. You can boil it down to give me research and development companies, and it'll show you all the research and development companies in the Dayton area on a map even, so on like Google Maps. So it's pretty cool. And then hopefully the next one, this bullet's gonna be gone, but because I really want to stand this thing up right now, I'm just getting rid of my old intern's name and putting Ryan on there. Still gotta take a picture of it and put it on the site. So And then what do I need for you today is, I think everybody signed in, right? The laptops, so I have the historical. And then, give us your feedback. Tomorrow, we'll send you a survey out. Please fill out the survey, it only take you a couple minutes, there's only just a few questions. If you like the collider, please tell me. If you didn't like it, please tell me. I'll blame these guys, but that's okay.
I think that
Yeah.
feedback
But
is important.
the feedback is very important because we are a nonprofit here, okay? So obviously, we have to serve a purpose, and hopefully we're helping you guys become successful. Okay, that's the main goal here, okay? So, oh yeah, give me ideas if you have a idea for a collider, because I'm always looking for ideas for colliders. A lot of these colliders I have come from people like you. What's your pains? What do you need to learn? Okay, so that's one of my biggies right there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the DCAA folks. I'll queue up your video of accounting first, right?
Yes.
First, before you start, we're just going to introduce ourselves to you. I'm Robin Laird. I've been with DCA for over 16 years. I'm currently a financial liaison advisor at Wright Pat Air Force Base. For those of you who don't know what that means, I'm there for the command. I give them suggestions of what DCA can do for them. If they have any issues or concerns, or what kind of audits we can do for them, I'm there for them along with other projects. So I've been there for 4 years, but before that I was at the office and was an auditor for 12. And we work mostly mobility. So we're on the Dayton branch, which is on Presidential Drive, which is across the street from Wright State, so in those white buildings. So that's what we're looking at. So I will be doing the real-time labor evaluation, so I'll be doing that presentation for you.
My name is Jody Knapke. I've been with DCA for almost 14 years. I spent time in the Iraq branch office, the European branch office, the Saudi Arabia sub-office, and then I moved back to Ohio. I started in Dayton, or actually down in Cincinnati, and then I came to Dayton, and then went on my worldwide tour, as I say. But I've been back since 2010, and I'm currently a supervisor in the Dayton branch. I was an assistant for quality, or really a technical assistant for about 5 years, where I provided technical support on all different types of audits. But I just started my supervisor position, and we have about 30 auditors in the Dayton office, and we primarily, our area, our current area that we audit in is really the Dayton and Cincinnati area.
Predominantly.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, my name is Mark Cohen. I'm also a supervisory auditor in the Dayton branch office. I've been with DCA over 25 years. I've done a breadth of audits. If it's out there for the most part, I've probably done it or touched it. DCA wants to provide this opportunity for us to have this dialogue and start talking about those things where you're going to encounter us. Where are you going to encounter us? We've talked about both of them just briefly today. The first one is probably a pre-award accounting system, and the second one will probably be a proposal. You'll submit a proposal, and it will be there for audit, and they'll ask us, DCA, come in and help us out. So, given we're going to talk about accounting systems today, the next Collider project will be about proposals. Those are really where we're going to start having that FaceTime. So, with that said, how many of you have had any exposure to DCAA to date? Okay. May I ask which contractors you're with?
I work for a CPA firm, so we have a wide variety of contractors we work with. I know Martin and I have worked on set across from each other for a couple weeks with one in regards to spectral energies. Work with several more in the Dayton area.
Okay.
I've run few technology companies, software manufacturing type companies, and have had multiple audits over the years. They've always been helpful, explaining to people that the audits have been an opportunity for us to improve our processes and the like, and it's been good experiences.
I have done contracting for over 25 years, so let's see. I experienced DCAA when I worked for CACI, MTC Technologies, and then way back in the day, I worked for DCMA. So I experienced them on a different level.
Different perspective,
Yep.
different frontal
Yep.
type connection.
Yeah, my prior position over at ATIC.
Yes, been there.
I've been on both sides of the house. I was the Laircom SPM, so we had a big contract with Northrop Grumman that we needed to use DCAA, DCMA to kind of help us with. And then now I'm in a different uniform now on the other side of the fence with the proposals and Oasis.
Oasis,
And all that
yes.
stuff that's going around. So the reason I came out here is to hear a little bit about the black magic behind how we figure out what's cost reasonableness and the whole DCAA audit to support the contracting officers.
I was part of that Oasis project, and they were trying to get all the contractors.
It's been interesting. Maybe we can have some discussion on that while you're here.
They haven't said much to me since we had the banquet down here
Yeah,
in DC.
or New Orleans or wherever GSA holds them half the time.
And at the end of the presentation today, we'll talk about, there's a DCA website out there that has a number of tools that are available for you to, look at. And as we go on this journey, I mean, DCA is here to work with you. We cannot tell you exactly how to do this, okay? But we can have a dialogue about, Jan says it should be done this way, this is why, and DCA can say, well, Jan, you need to consider this aspect, and this aspect as you make that decision. So through that open dialogue, it's productive and positive for you, and it's positive for us, because it's not easy to be in a confrontational situation and say, Dave, I don't like what you're doing with Spectral Energies, and this is wrong. We want to work together so it's smooth for you, the contractor, and that interaction with the government, so it's a positive, productive, efficient process. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jody, and we're going to talk about accounting systems.
Okay, as I go through this presentation, if you guys have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, because you don't have to keep your questions to the end. I think it's a lot more productive to talk about the question that you may have, as we're going through the presentation. We may say, okay, let's go ahead and table this one and get together afterwards for a one-on-one, or we also will write down any action items that we have if a question is left unanswered that, we have to get back to you on. So, yeah. The pre-award accounting system is conducted in accordance with the requirements of FAR 9.106. So the survey includes the completion of the standard form 1408, which summarizes whether or not the accounting system is acceptable for the prospective contract. How many have had experience with completing a 1408? Okay, well, good. I might ask you to chime in if you have any, any comments, but we'll go through the requirements of an adequate accounting system, and I'll show you an example of a 1408. So the pre-award accounting system is an audit that determines if the contractor has an acceptable accounting system designed for accumulating the cost under a prospective government contract. So you may not actually have a government contract, a lot of times you don't, but what will come out there and look to say, is your system designed to track costs to be in accordance with the requirements of the DFARS 252-214-006, which is the Accounting System Administration Clause. There's 10 items listed on this standard form. for the pre-award survey. And this is pertains to the method that you account for costs in your accounting system. So we'll discuss each of these. I'll pull up the form first. Normally what happens is the contracting officer will actually ask you to request you to complete the form and send it to them, and then they will request an audit with us and attach that. Now, if we get requested to do a pre-award accounting system and we don't have that form completed by you, we will reach out to you and ask you to complete that form, at the beginning processes of our audit. So, and during the audit, you should be able to demonstrate how your accounting system satisfies that. And it may be that you walk us through actual transactions, or you may say, this is how I set it up. Okay. So, can you click, open that? That'd be fantastic. You might have to do like escape and then.
Yeah, there's. You trust me,
I hope so. We have enough security. Half the
not
time we can't
working.
even get to the government sites that.
It stopped working. Didn't like it.
Well, we can get to it from the DCAA website, or with a form like this, you can always just Google. If you type in SF 1408, it'll pop right up with a link, but I think we got it.
Looks like it's working. Maybe.
All right.
We'll see.
So this form will, you will go through and you will, on the second page, like we make a recommendation. Let's,
No?
yes. So the evaluation checklist, what you'll do is you'll go through this evaluation checklist and you'll check, okay, can my system, and we're gonna go through each of these, so I'm not gonna read through the actual form. But you'll go through and check, okay, can my system do this? Can my system do that? That's gonna tell you exactly what we're looking for. Our audit program is written exactly from this form. So when we come out, we're gonna step by step go through this form and ask you, okay, can you demonstrate your accumulation of costs under general ledger control? Show us how you do that, or show us how you plan to do that. So if you go through this, if you go through the process of going through this checklist, you're essentially gonna, prepare yourself for the audit when we do come out. So, and then what happens is we actually complete this form ourselves at the end of the audit, and we will make a recommendation. We say that yes, the system is designed and can accumulate costs for government contracts, or we say no. And if we say no, we don't just say no. Just so you know, we don't just say no and move forward. We have dialogue with you. We explain our position. We'll actually give you a written, what's called a condition statement, to have you look at and have you respond. We'll work through the process to make sure you understand why it's not meeting that regulation.
Is this something you have to accomplish for every procurement, or is there some sort of like certification period that once you've done this, then you're good to go for 5 years or something like that?
Usually, if you have a pre-award certification, you can probably answer this more, Robin, as you deal with it, with the commands more. Usually, if you have it and you can prove it, and like you may have something in writing, or a lot of times we get requests from buying commands to say, do they have an adequate accounting system? So we'll look in our records and say what exposure that we have we been at the contractor? Because there's a lot of contractors, we consistently go to, and we consistently monitor, accounting records.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I'm just curious if, say I have a procurement and 5 people send me proposals, then do they send something in that I pay no attention to, but procurement does, that says, yea, verily, they've been blessed with their accounting system and they're good to go? Cause they always
DCMA
send in 2345s along with it and all that, so.
DCMA I know has a system and a lot of the FLAs are asked. So normally, like, in utopia, we should be able to work together. But I know DCMA has a system also where they go in and document whether a contractor has an adequate accounting system. So the short answer is yes. Does it always work that way? No. And it can always also depend if there's a lag between awards. You know, like if say you have an award and then 5 years later you get another award and you may not have government business. You know, that's gonna be up to the contracting officer to make that determination, is to say, you know, I wanna get an audit, or I'm happy with what, you know, the government has in its file. So, as any auditor's favorite answer is, it depends. So, and then the third, can you scroll back up to the top? I just wanted to show you that's really, our audit program is based right on that, and I'll show you at the end of our presentation. Right here, that's good. I'll show you at the end of the presentation where you actually can go out and you can see all our audit programs. That we, you know, that's the start of what we start with, and then we obviously modify it for each audit is different and unique, so, you know, we tailor it to the specific engagement. So, and then it may say yes, but that we recommend that a follow-up accounting system be performed after the contract award. And a lot of times, the reason that we make this recommendation is if we just looked at the design and your system does not have costs running through it, or you have T&M type contracts, and we see that, but you don't have any cost type contracts. So a lot of times we make that recommendation. Yes, it's designed, but I do recommend that what we call a post-award accounting system be performed, you know, once the contract has been awarded. So that's what that recommendation, the short answer for that recommendation. Okay. So any questions on this form? All right.
Next slide.
Yes, please. So DFARS 252-1503 requires the insertion of the accounting system administration clause, which it says a system complies with the system criteria in paragraph C of this clause to provide reasonable assurance that applicable laws and regulations are complied with. So we want to make sure your system's designed to comply with the laws and regulations. The accounting system and cost data is reliable. So we want to make sure that the data that you are keeping, that you're accumulating, it is reliable data. You know, so that's why we go out and when we do these, we'll look, you know, we'll trace through the system and we'll look at that supporting documentation. The risk of misallocation and mischarging are minimized. So you know that you have controls in place to ensure that, you know, costs on government contracts are limited to costs on government contracts and by contract. And then contractual allocations and charges are consistent with the billing procedure. So, you know, we want to make sure that your accounting records, you know, can easily be linked to your billing process or your billing system, because those can be two distinct, like, applications, but all one system. So we're going to cover the key requirements of the accounting administration clause. So I kind of alluded to this before, that there may be subsystems for like billing and labor. So how many of you use like an outside payroll service? So that can be, you know, those applications can become part of that accounting system review, because you may do your time, some applications have the timesheets and the payroll processing out there. So, and a lot of times, labor timekeeping is separate than, you know, outside of the accounting system. Like, You may have paper timesheets, or you may use Excel files, or, you may have a separate avenue for the timekeeping system. And the same with billing. Billing may not necessarily be in your general ledger or accounting, but that may be a separate system. Has anybody had any experiences having like multiple applications, but all within one accounting system? Like two different, like if you had QuickBooks and maybe an Excel file that actually tracked contract costs. So that would be all of your accounting system then.
Correct.
Yeah,
You almost have to do that with QuickBooks.
with QuickBooks. Yeah.
To make sure that you are compliant, you gotta have it.
So, and that's an example, and like the timekeeping system that's outside. Like if I know that there's ADP and all these other companies, they actually, not just process payroll, but they also have applications out there now where you can have timesheets and go in and employees can sign in and certifiers can sign right into their system. So they provide those timesheet applications along with that payroll processing. So total contract cost. So FAR 52-706C2 requires the proper segregation of direct costs from indirect costs. So has anybody dealt with this? Does anybody know, what does that mean? Whole lot of mumbo jumbo. So while costs on the contract may include like direct costs, like direct labor, I work directly on this contract, there's also indirect costs, such as your facilities, insurance, fringe. So the question is does the system properly segregate those direct and those indirect costs? And also, are the costs allowable and are unallowable costs properly tracked? So direct costs, so 242-706C3 requires identification and accumulation of direct costs by contract. So FAR 2.101 defines direct costs as any cost that is identified specifically with a particular final cost objective. So that means, was that effort or was that material incurred directly for the performance of that contract? So that what they mean by final cost objective, in the terms of contracting, we can say contract or subcontract. Direct costs are not limited to items that are not limited to the items that are incorporated into the end product as material or labor. So some examples would be travel, and there may be other contract labor. So is travel sometimes direct, and sometimes travel is indirect. No final cost shall have allocated to it a direct cost, any cost that has been included in an indirect cost pool. So you can't charge a cost direct to a contract and then also include it in your indirect pool. So a cost is either direct or indirect. Direct costs of the contract shall be charged directly to the contract. So some examples, like I said before, are travel, labor, material, subcontract cost. Any questions on direct cost? Indirect cost means any cost not directly identified with a single final cost objectives, but identified with two or more final cost objectives or an intermediate cost objective. So what are some examples of indirect costs? Like what are some costs that are just the cost of doing business?
materials, that kind of thing?
Well-
Looking more like rent,
Rent.
Facilities.
accounting fees,
Printers, computers.
just run the gamut of the business.
Business supplies, what it costs to run the business, to stand up the business. Indirect labor is, like your accounting personnel, the secretary that answers the phone, all of those are examples of indirect costs. Insurance, fringe benefit cost is another indirect cost. So an indirect cost is not to be allocated to a final cost objective if other costs incurred for the same purpose and like circumstances have been included as a direct cost of any other final cost objective. So what that means is, like I said before, a cost, it's either direct or it's indirect. So if this cost is normally charged direct, like materials when it's normally charged direct, normally you incur material to specifically perform that final cost objective or that contract. So you wouldn't see that. There is instances where materials could be indirect, like if it was a B&P type effort. But in most cases, material is charged direct.
What's your definition of cost objective on this?
On this, think of that as your contract. Your final cost objective would be your contract. So, but like for an intermediate cost objective, that wouldn't necessarily be your contract, but that may be if you have if you develop a fringe rate, that a fringe rate then goes into like an overhead and a G&A. That would be considered like an intermediate cost objective. So you may accumulate those indirect costs of that intermediate cost objective. So, you accumulate those costs to, and align them with the benefiting cost, so like, to the beneficial cost. So that intermediate cost objective would have like a pool of fringe, and then a base could potentially be like labor dollars. So that would be your intermediate cost objective in a rate structure. Or your final cost objective also could be like the G&A pool, where you accumulate all the G&A costs.
You mentioned fringe as an indirect cost, and you get that, but is that not also tracked separately, fringe?
You mean it depends on your rate structure.
Okay.
It would be dependent on your rate structure. You may have an intermediate fringe pool. I mean, how you establish your rate structure, that's a business decision.
I see, okay.
So, I've seen it multitudes of ways. I mean, I've seen fringe by location, I've seen, overall company fringe, it just really depends on that business makeup. And sometimes fringe is just included in the overhead pool. So. So DFARS 252-7006C4 requires a logical and consistent method for the accumulation and allocation of indirect costs to intermediate and final cost objectives. So everything has to be, logically put together. So for instance, if I had rent cost, and I had a facility and I had two overhead rates. I had two indirect rates. I had an overhead rate and a G&A rate. If I had rent cost, and like 90% of my facility was really, where my manufacturing or my research and development happened, those rent costs would normally be allocated to that overhead pool, where that other 10% would be allocated to that G&A pool, because G&A, folks that are predominantly G&A, occupy that space. So that's an example of, a logical and consistent allocation. So you could allocate like rent based on square footage. You could allocate it based on head count. So there has to be some type of consistent allocation. And the same thing with like a base, like an indirect cost base. You know, it may make sense to have a rate structure that has direct labor, direct hours for your overhead base. The term indirect cost covers a wide variety of categories, and the costs involved are not all incurred for the same reasons. A number of indirect accounts. The number of indirect accounts can range from, you might have one indirect cost account to you could have hundreds. The indirect structure needs to be tailored to your company and how it operates. So, you know, like I said before, there's a multitude of ways to develop an indirect rate structure, and it really just depends on how the business operates. In general, though, indirect costs fall into two broader categories, kind of what I alluded to before as overhead and G&A. So some examples of some indirect rates would be material overhead, manufacturing overhead, engineering overhead, and site overhead. FAR 31203C, which is indirect rates, states that the contractor shall accumulate indirect costs by logical groupings with due consideration of the reason for incurring such costs. So you should group like costs together. The contractor shall determine each grouping so to permit the use of an allocation base that is common to all cost objectives to which the grouping is to be allocated. The base selected shall allocate the grouping of the basis of the benefit accruing to intermediate and final cost objectives. So you know, to have that relationship, these indirect costs relate to this base of cost, the benefiting cost. So when substantially the same results can be achieved through less precise methods, the number and composition of cost groupings should be governed by practical considerations and should not unduly complicate the allocation. So I mean, any company could probably come up with, you know, 15 indirect rates if they wanted to. But is it unduly complicating, you know, your cost structure where you would arrive at the same results? So that's always something to consider when you're developing your rate structure. Okay, so we're gonna put breaks in here, or do you guys want to take a break, or keep going?
Keep going.
You can tell I'm used to training CPEs, because like in 50 minutes, I'm like, okay, it's the break time. I trained for 5 years. So I'm so used to, you know, at 50 minutes, regardless of when I start, to take a break. So I'll leave it up to you guys. If you guys want a break, just, you know.
We saw one vote for break.
We saw one vote for
She can
break.
keep going, she has to take the plane. Girl in the corner, all the way in the corner?
She's already gone.
Yeah,
She's gone.
yeah, that's what I was talking